Why do people take on thankless tasks? Sometimes it's a parent who is so devoted to his child or her child to the point where they don't have any time for their own lives. Sometimes it's a child with an elderly parent who is absolutely devoted in doing everything they can for them. Very often it's people who choose professions like soldiers and firemen and policemen who put their lives in the line of fire to protect the rest of us. And the question is why do people choose thankless tasks, thankless jobs? Where does all of this selflessness come from? In actuality, love and selflessness is a bit of a riddle. Charles Darwin, when he was outlining the theory of evolution, had a great intellectual problem with absolute and selfless love. He couldn't understand how certain beings could sacrifice their own lives for others. This seems to run counter to the survival of the fittest. It seems very strange that an organism that is created and instinctually wants to survive and wants to procreate, that organism would give up its own life for something else. And this is, of course, a riddle for evolutionary scientists. It's not a question for me to resolve. But it is a question that I have to resolve on a religious level. How is it that people can be selfless? Where does that come from? What's interesting is that there are societies that chose not to be selfless. There are societies that specifically chose not to love. The Bible tells us about the city of Sodom, which was ultimately destroyed. And in the book of Ezekiel, the city of Sodom is described as a city that refuses to give charity. And when the rabbinic literature elaborates on this, it turns Sodom into a city that ideologically does not want to share with the vulnerable. They believe that the survival of the fittest is the reality of life, and that to share with the vulnerable would be a terrible mistake. So the question is why do people do selfless things? Why are they willing to give up so much? And perhaps Maimonides explains it best. Maimonides, in distilling what is one of the most profound thoughts of Judaism, the idea of serving from love. Maimonides, when he describes it, says that a person who serves God out of love does so not because he's going to receive any reward. He's not going to get anything in this world. He doesn't even expect a reward in the next world. Rather, Maimonides says, a person who serves out of love does what is right because it is right. Oseh emet mifnei shehu emet. And this is a profound idea. Somewhere deep down in our soul, we know we should be doing the right thing. And because of that powerful spiritual instinct, we are willing to give up our lives even to help others. We are willing to sacrifice everything in the service of others and the service of a higher cause. And that's the explanation of all of those who were willing to run around on 9/11 and risk their lives and sometimes sacrifice their lives in order to save the lives of others. The man in the red bandana is one famous example. Abe Zelmanowitz is another famous example. Look at all of these people who did heroic things. Where does that heroism come from? It comes from a deep instinct deep down in our soul that says, do what is right because it is right. You know, it's interesting. John Stuart Mill has a wonderful quote on this idea, where he says, it is better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. Better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied. John Stuart Mill understood that even when we pursue happiness, the greatest happiness that comes to us is from doing what is right. And that is why we are willing to be selfless. This is an idea that the world has seen demonstrated over and over again. One example in particular remains in my mind, because we recently had the chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Israel Meir Lau, come visit our synagogue. And in his autobiography, he tells not just his story, but he tells the story of his older brother Naphtali. Yisrael Meir Lau was a 5-year-old child when the Holocaust, when the Germans and the Nazis came marching into his town. And his parents turned to his older brother Naphtali, 10 years his senior, and said, make sure you save Yisrael Meir. And at great danger and constant risk to his life, Naphtali did absolutely everything to make sure Yisrael Meir lived. And because of that, the Jewish people had the privilege of having this wonderful, wonderful man, this chief rabbi of Israel, all because his brother risked his life over and over again to make sure that this little boy survived the Shoah. This is a lesson in love. This is a lesson in selflessness. And this reminds us why people do thankless jobs. We do it because it's the right thing. We do it because we far prefer to be a person who is dissatisfied than a pig who is satisfied.